Hello, everybody. This is Jason from STEM Nerds. I wanted to take a few moments and talk about how students can be successful in the sciences and in particular in biology. As many of you know, I've got lots of videos on here related to microbiology, biology for both majors and non-majors, and genetics, and we're adding to that collection every single week. And I've taught pretty much all of the ologies with the exception of anatomy and physiology related to biology. And what I often see are certain characteristics of students who are successful. At this point in my career, with almost 20 years of teaching experience, I've literally had thousands upon thousands of students go through my classes. And there are certain things that they often do well. And I've seen these patterns over the last couple decades, and I want to take a few minutes and share them with you to hopefully maximize your success in the sciences and in particularly the life sciences. All right, so thing number one. This is going to sound really simple, but a lot of students overlook this, and that is time. Do you have the time, the proper amount of time set aside to study the sciences? The sciences are one of the, if not the most time-consuming subject to really thoroughly understand. What we often recommend is for every hour that you're going to be in class, you should be setting aside 2 hours outside of class in order to accomplish everything you need to in order to be successful in your biology course. And so that means study time for exams and quizzes, times to do lab write-ups and papers and everything else that goes into being a successful student. So if you don't have the time, everything else I say to you isn't going to matter because you're not going to have the time to successfully complete the course. One of the things I have my students do, especially some of my intro students, is actually do an assignment where they have to schedule their time using the parameters that I've set forth. And so they have to have all their contact time they're going to be in class, assume at least 2 hours for every hour inside of class that's going to be outside. For the non-science classes, a lot of times it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Add in their job, add in all their activities, and then look at their schedule and determine if that schedule is realistic for the next 16 weeks. And that is something I strongly encourage you to do right from the start as well. Next thing, if you are taking a course that is going to be in class in person, you really should consider doing the reading, or if your instructor has videos, watch those before you come to class. My best students usually use class time as review, not the first time they're hearing the information that we're going to be covering. And so it's really important if your instructor, if your professor has given you the videos, has given you stuff to read, has provided study guides as I do for my students, those things absolutely should be done before you come to class. The other thing I think a lot of students overlook is the importance of office hours if your instructor or professor has them. If you've got questions and you're ahead of them a little bit, especially if you're ahead of them by about a week or so, you can get questions answered. And this is especially important as you start to think about test prep and prepping for quizzes. If you can get a week ahead of your instructor, that allows you that additional week to ask questions during office hours if they're offered. And I highly recommend, if your instructor does offer office hours and you have need of them, if you are confused about a subject, you definitely should be attending. This is going to sound really silly, and I really shouldn't have to say this, but I do. And that is the most successful students are in class on time every single week. They almost never miss a week of school because they know even if they've got a good excuse, oh, you know what, I was under the weather or I had this thing going on, the excuse is fine. It might be valid, but if you can get to class anyway, do it because you're still missing out. You're still falling behind regardless of whether or not the excuse is valid. For those of you who are taking courses online, that goes back to your schedule. Make sure the time that you've set aside for studying, for engaging in the material is consistent and that you don't miss that time, because while you might have a reason why, in the end, does it really matter if you're not performing on the exams as well as you had hoped? As you're prepping for exams, assessments, it's really important. If your instructor has lecture videos like I do for my hybrid courses and my online courses, re-watch those videos as many times as it takes to truly understand the information. If you are in a course where it is mostly a textbook-based course, Reread those chapters as many times as it takes until you thoroughly understand the information. Now, I'm going to give you a warning here because I've seen this a lot, especially since around 2024 or so. More and more students are depending on ChatGPT and AI to give them notes. Let me tell you that since that has happened, students are starting to struggle. One of the things that note-taking helps, one of the things that writing your notes based on videos, based on what you've read, what that does for you is it helps solidify the content in your actual brain. When you've got AI doing it for you, and by the way, I've seen some of the stuff that ChatGPT does with my own notes from my classes. They're pretty darn good. But it's giving my students is a series of facts to memorize. And that is not how biology works. It's certainly not how I teach my courses. You have to understand the concepts and you have to be able to pull all these concepts together. And ChatGPT is not doing that for you. And you are going to lose out tremendously if you are not taking the time to engage in the content, to write your own notes, to organize your own thoughts. You're losing out. And as the information that you study, as the courses that you take get more and more complex, that is going to be all the more important. Learning those study skills, learning what it takes to help you understand the information in a way that you've constructed. And it's just, while it's there, it's a tool. It's not wrong to use it for organizing your notes, but I highly recommend if your instructor has videos, re-watch the videos. Make sure you understand the context of what is being covered. And that is the thing I am seeing so many students lose out on, and their grades are suffering tremendously because of it. I mentioned before, at least for me in my classes, I do have concept lists that I provide to my students. I want my students to know the most important things that we're covering, and I try to do a really good job of making sure that the concept lists that I supply are also the things that I am covering in my lectures, are also the things that they're going to be assessed on at the end of each unit. If you've got those, if your instructor or professor provides those to you, make sure you do them first of all. And second of all, at some point, what I always encourage my students to do is set aside the notes that they have and get a blank copy of the study guide / concept sheet and see if they can actually explain it as though they were teaching the concepts themselves. If you can do that without referring to your notes, there's a pretty good chance that you indeed understand the information that has been covered. If you can't do that, if you have to refer to your notes, guess what? You don't know it. One of the things that scares me as a professor is when I see my students the day of an exam and they're going over their study guides, which is fine, but when I ask them questions, they have to review back to their study guides in order to answer the questions. They don't know it. And by that point, it is way too late to do anything about it. And so you should be able to answer and explain the concepts without having to refer back to your notes. It's a perfectly normal thing. I always tell my students in biology, especially in our health science centers and in our biology centers, to watch students just walking up and down a hall or sitting in a quiet place, talking to themselves about the material. Maybe you're doing that at home. Perfectly an acceptable thing to do, and it's one of the ways in which we learn. And I started out the video with this concept. I want to reiterate it one last time. If you are not putting in the time to actually understand the concepts that you are learning, there is no substitute. When we get into more difficult concepts, for my students, those things are usually molecular biology, metabolism. I always tell them the first time you watch my videos, the first time that you read a textbook concerning these matters, you might be overwhelmed and you might be like, wow, you know what? I think I understood about 10% of what I actually read. That is perfectly okay. If that is you, you're normal, right? The abnormal people are the ones that watch a really, really complex video or read something that's really complex and understand it the first time. Those people are not normally what's going to happen in the human mind. I was not like that as a student. I had to rewatch and reread. And every time you do that, every time you're exposed to the material, you start to understand a greater percentage until the concepts that you thought were once impossible to learn become just normal and commonplace. And you can, of course, get those reinforcements by going to office hours and making sure that you understand the concepts. But I wanted to pass these things along. And again, the warning here is with the AI, I know it can be a real time saver, but just because you're saving time doesn't mean you're actually improving your ability to understand the concepts. As always, thank you so much for being here. Have a great week, everyone.